Good afternoon. Welcome to the November 8th Civil Service Commission meeting. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner Abkarian?
Here.
Commissioner McCarley?
Present.
Chairman Manukian?
Yes.
For the record, Commissioner Gazarian is absent, and item number 9 has been pulled from today's meeting and will be deferred to a future meeting.
Okay, what's next?
Minutes for the meeting of September 13, 2017.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Move minutes. Second.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Chairman Manukian?
Yes. What's next?
Oral communications.
I have no cards. What's next?
Recruitment and examination report.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is our regular recruitment and examination status workload report. As you can see, we're picking up a lot of both open and promotional activities. Currently, we have 58 processes in various stages. This report is listed. You have the staff involved in conducting the recruitment. You have the specific job listed, the filing periods, and any test dates that are available. And so it's a general snapshot of where we are at with our recruitment efforts and really the various components of that. If you have any questions on this report, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Otherwise, it's a note and file for your information only.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. If we could turn to the second page of your status report with respect to recruitment actions, and looking in the job categories of both 12-7563, which is police officer, and the successive series 17-00163, there are two notations for police officer recruits, and one has a close date and the other one indicates that the date for applications is continuous. Is there a reason for those two entries?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McCarley, the police officer recruit is a pretty much a continuous process, and I don't believe we leave it open all year long, but we do try to do these quarterly, and there's a point at which we receive sufficient applications. Then we proceed with what we believe to be a rather expedited process where we combine physical agility, written exam all in one day, and then follow that up shortly with oral interviews. But it's a process that does overlap a little bit, but we try to keep it going as make it as continuous as we possibly can, and that's pretty much what you have to do to be competitive. And I think we're it's one of the hardest jobs to recruit for, period, right now. But I think we do a pretty good job of keeping it active and fresh and getting new candidates in on a continuous basis. And if I could have maybe Sean come up and...
That's fine. I'm satisfied with the response.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right. What's next?
Eligible list established.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is the eligible lists that have been established. This report actually covers 2 months since we canceled our meeting for October, so it is quite a long list of lists, so to speak. I counted about 28, which is a lot of activity. And again, this is, as I say, typically this is the culmination of these recruitment processes where we go through maybe a written exam, a practical exam, interview panels, and then at the very end of that, we have an eligible list. And this report shows the far right column, the total number of candidates who succeed in those, getting on each of those lists. And the nice part about having the eligible lists is that they typically last 1 to 2 years, and we hopefully are able to hire multiple candidates from each of these lists as the life of the list extends and as we have the departmental needs. So again, on this report, you see a lot of recruitments, and you kind of see the typical pattern where we have an open recruitment. You tend to have a large pool of candidates. The promotional ones, it's typically a much smaller pool. But either way, it's a lot of work, and whether it's promotional or open, we make sure that all the candidates go through a very rigorous process, and we have a list to show from that. So with that, if you have any questions, again, I'd be happy to try and answer them. This too is a note and file item.
Mr. Chair, just
Yes,
a quick
please.
one. I would presume then that there were no appeals to the testing process.
Commissioner
According to the
McCarthy,
regs, there is a
Yeah.
facility to appeal if, in fact, an applicant were to see some sort of deficiency within the testing mechanisms. So there's no column, and I would assume, therefore, no one protested the tests.
that is correct, and I'm just looking through these. There may be circumstances where an individual test item, such as if we give a written exam for something, and somebody contacts us about a particular test question that they feel is either irrelevant or non-job related or unfair. Those are the types of things that we would resolve, typically informally or formally with staff. If it can't be resolved, then ultimately it could end up here. But as far as the primary testing mechanisms for all of these, which I would say most of these would culminate in an oral interview panel, I can say there's no appeals for any of these.
Thank you.
that are listed.
Okay. Any other questions? What's next?
Class specification for approval, power line truck operator.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a class specification. This is a revision of an existing class specification. It's the power line truck operator. This is a position that operates commercial vehicles in our Water and Power Department, mainly transporting equipment, sometimes large equipments like those long power poles, assisting the various line mechanic crews. And as part of this job, they also assist the crews if something needs to be dug or tools need to be passed along, that sort of thing. This position would do it. This is coming before the Commission because it's been about 10 years since we've updated this class specification, and we're set to do another recruitment for it right now. And most of the changes are just to update it and added some boilerplate language to the knowledges, skills, and abilities and the duties. Additionally, we're enhancing the driver's license requirements and ensuring that we have the commercial license that's required for this, as well as looks like a commercial tanker endorsement as well. So,
Actually, I was going to ask you, what is a tank vehicle endorsement?
I believe this is I'm not an expert at that, so I'm going to have, this is Brian Brown, he's our electrical superintendent, and I'll let him get into the discussion.
Brian Brown, electrical superintendent for GWP. The tank endorsement, we have a vehicle that carries distilled water that washes the power lines and the insulators. So that's what the tanker endorsement is for, to drive that vehicle to wash the power lines.
All right, thank you. Sorry, when I read tank, threw me off a little bit.
And it's not a
I want that job.
It's not a specific license. It is an endorsement or an addition to the commercial license that's required for the
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. Mr. Doyle, it appears to me, and I commend the modification, adjustment, and upgrade of the classifications. It is interesting because it's a much broader question. Of course, we don't have that time for the broader question. That what you've added, or what the department has added, is a successive series of subjective criteria with respect to job performance. As to the acquisition of an endorsement to the Class A license, completely understandable. What we've introduced, which I think should be a subject of a discussion at a later day, is some subjective criteria to include develop intercommunication skills, effectively work independently and part of a team, maintain smooth and effective working relationships, and resolve. A couple more of those. Now, while all of those are commendable, and as somebody who has been involved in this type of management activity for a long, long time, those are certainly job skills that you would appreciate as a manager and certainly want to display as an employee of this great city of Glendale. That said, these are not objective criteria. And so the interesting issue is how we move forward and measure. And if we install these particular criteria in a job within the Public Works Department, will these same criteria, which are absolutely subjective, hard to identify, hard to put your finger on, will all these objectives migrate across the workforce, and we're going to see the same type of skills request, these subjective criteria for determination of a candidate's adequacy for the job found in the fire department, the police department, your department? That's my question.
Well, that's a good question, Commissioner McCarley. All I can say is, as we review these, we try to enhance these requirements. These aren't technically requirements, but they sort of are. But it's the things that we would want to add when we see an ideal or we have an ideal circumstance for a candidate. And what you mentioned, were mostly in the ability to column, and we want candidates that have the ability to foster a teamwork environment. We want them to establish smooth and effective working relationships. This coincides with a lot of the changes we've made in our performance appraisal process in the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, in trying to assess not just the person's hard skills or the objective skills that as you put it, but also some of the soft skills, the things that are important. It's great to have somebody who knows how to drive a truck and knows how to lift and carry and move equipment, but that person has to work as a member of a team, as a member of a crew, and if they're going to do that job very well, the objective aspects of it, we want them to also have some of those soft skills as well. The ability to work well as a group, as a member of a team. I will say, and you've been in this business a long time, 25 years ago, those skills, those abilities weren't really weren't really required or addressed much, either in our job descriptions or in our performance appraisals. And I would wager that they are as equally important as some of the hard skills. You can be, if you look at any profession, civil engineering or, working in a library, you can be as the most efficient engineer or librarian, good at what you're doing, but if you don't have the interpersonal skills, the ability to get along with people, work as a member of a team, to cooperate with staff, then that could be a real problem for the organization. And our intent is to hold people accountable for those types of subjective skills, plain and simple, because it's part of the job, and it's now part of the performance appraisal. So.
I'm going to make a quick rejoinder and certainly commend you for the responsiveness and the detail of your answer. My concern, of course, is not to castigate these particular, obviously beneficial work attributes. The concern, and you made reference to my own long history in this particular HR environment, is that these are often the basis for issues regarding discrimination in terms of employment, hiring, and others, because you don't have something objective in which you can measure a person's ability to perform the job. And a subjective criteria offers a wide opportunity if somebody or somebody within the organizational structure were intent upon favoring one category versus another. And that is my concern. So at some point I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners, not tonight, of course, move on, to perhaps revisit this, because this is expanding across the board. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to say that I wouldn't mind visiting that area and just looking at it. I understand what Commissioner McCarty is saying, that if by any chance someone gets fired tomorrow and they appeal that to the Civil Service Commission, and me and Mr. McCarty and someone else is sitting there saying, unfortunately, you did not meet the minimum requirements for your job, they're going to say, what is it? And we say, exceptional customer service. And they're going to say, but I think that I gave exceptional customer service. And there's no way of saying that he or she didn't. And I think that's what Commissioner McCarty was saying, that there should be some objective criteria. And I always look at this saying, this will come in front of us a year from now with someone being fired and saying, I met all these requirements, and we're going to say no, and they're going to say, yes, we did. Like, for me, exceptional customer service means like Nordstrom. Like, customer could never be wrong. Never. So I'm assuming that this is like a Nordstrom. I'm not giving a advertising for Nordstrom, but I'm just saying
this is true.
I don't know the difference between good customer service, great customer service, and exceptional customer service. For me, they're all kind of the same, unless if you have a specific definition for it.
Commissioners, I would agree that it's much more challenging to measure those specific attributes. But the example you give, and by the way, I think the community, the members of the Glendale community residents, I think would appreciate customer service at the level of Nordstrom by their city employees. So there's nothing wrong with that at all.
None.
Measuring that is a challenge, but we can look at we have supervisors who are paid big bucks to supervise people, and when they have complaints about a particular employee, rudeness, things like that, those are things that we can use to address something like customer service. Conversely, if we have an employee who gets continual high marks from people that they interact with about their customer service skills and their ability to go the extra amount to please our clients, whether that's an email we get or a nice letter from a resident or just somebody who gets up at a city council meeting and says, your permit department does a great job. Those are the things we can cite, and that's what we tell supervisors. When you're doing that performance evaluation, cite examples. And as many examples as you have of that particular conduct will help support it. But I think kind of the first step in pushing toward some of those soft skills is to get it in the job description, to lay it out there. This is what our expectation is, and that's the first step, because you want to make them aware of what the expectation is. Then you can hold them accountable for it. So I welcome this kind of a discussion, but I have to say this is definitely the place to include that kind of language.
I don't think the discussion is not to include. I think discussion is to add another section that would say objective measuring criteria or something like that. Well, I think we can discuss this sometime in the future.
Yeah. Let's bring that back, and I think what I'm hearing is fellow commissioners are saying let's find a way of putting a value to that, some kind of way of evaluating what is exceptional customer service. I think
I would echo the chair's statement of direction, Mr. Doyle, because as you're familiar, there are different schools of thought in the HR community with respect to exactly what you're talking about. And there are some very harsh critics of what you have identified across the board. We owe it to the employees of the city of Glendale and those who aspire to become employees in this great city to have those type of objective criteria where everybody who comes before an examiner or before a promotional board will be given the opportunity, and his or her responses will be weighed objectively with the least amount of subjective criteria being applied. Otherwise, as Commissioner Abkarian indicated, we are opening ourselves up for potential lawsuits. And again, Mr. Doyle, as I say, this is progressive. There are significant differences between people in the HR community about what we have just done here in Glendale. So I would echo and endorse my chair's request that we have something akin to a much broader hearing about this subject in order to assure that Glendale is a community with employees of diverse backgrounds who are measured only on their ability.
Appreciate that. Okay.
Any other comment? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve.
Second. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Chairman O'King.
Yes. What's next?
Presentation of the Glendale Fire Department organizational structure.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, previous meeting it was requested to have Chief Greg Fish come back and give a brief description, presentation on the organization of the Glendale Fire Department. And I believe he's put together a PowerPoint presentation which touches upon those items. And it's very brief, but I think it's a good illustration of the organization and how it functions. So,
Chief, about
Chief
45
Fish.
minutes or so?
At least, yes.
You have the 85 slides that we requested? We're
Yes.
demanding of the
Yes, sir.
85 slides. Thank you, sir.
That was it, huh? That was the presentation? We're done.
Have a good
Thank you,
Mr.
sir.
Chair, members of the commission, it is my pleasure to be back before you and to brag about our department. I feel like a proud father of a family, because that's what we are. We're a family in the fire department. And I'm going to give you a brief overview of what our structure looks like, and I'll be happy to answer any questions along the way, so chime in wherever you see fit. First and foremost, if I can get this, there we go. The command staff, you'll see me at the top. I have a public safety business administrator and a public safety business coordinator, Anita Shandy and Julie Schaefer. Under them, they work directly for me. The administrator runs the budget, and the coordinator is PIO/administrative assistant. Deputy Chief Lynch runs the lion's share of the organization from his perspective. We have an EMS battalion chief, who is Cody Smith right now, and our Verdugo deputy chief, which is vacant. We're looking to fill that shortly, and that's what spurred upon this conversation. You guys wanted to see this when I came back. I think it was in September when we offered that position. Under Deputy Chief Lynch, we have the Fire Marshal Thomas Marchant. We have the Training Battalion Chief Brian Ritchie. We have a newly promoted as of the 13th of this month, Battalion Chief Chris Stavros will be running the A platoon, and the B platoon is run by Jeff Ragusa, and the C platoon is run by Brian Julian. If you notice, the three colored A, B, and C are what we know. We know that as our operations section. And to drill down in the operations section again, what you have is the three battalion chiefs working directly under the deputy chief, and on each platoon, we have 12 captains, 12 engineers, and 24 firefighters. And that's basically how it works. Let me motor on, and I'll try to explain that, make it a little clearer for you. But that's basically what we're looking at. Any day you call 911, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, you're going to get a captain on that crew that's going to be running the call. And if it's a bigger incident, a larger structure fire or a rescue or something that's requiring more than one company, you'll have a battalion chief that shows up as well to run the incident. Okay, so this is the question we get a lot. What is the difference between the short one and the long one? Well, this is the short one. This is the engine. The engine company, right? The apparatus that carries water, a pump, and hose. This is the long one, the truck. And the truck is the one that carries the aerial ladder first and foremost, ground ladders, and extensive rescue equipment. So the truck, we don't have a lot of trucks in the city. We only have 3, and that's because they're specialized equipment.
So this truck does not have any tanks, water tanks?
No, it does not have water on it, no.
I didn't know that.
Wow. Yeah.
This is the one I want to drive, by the way.
That's the one you want to drive in the back. It's the tiller.
there you go.
It's a lot of fun.
When the entire city is vacant, there's no one in the city. So
There you go.
the way he drives, he'd probably crash into at least 25 people.
Rescues right there. They can rescue.
We'll have the ambulance right behind him when he does it. The ambulance obviously is self-explanatory. It's the apparatus that carries the patients to the hospital, and staffed by 2 ambulance operators.
Chief, the city has their own ambulance services, plus they contract outside for if there's an overflow?
Yeah, so what happens is if it's a major medical incident, like the train incident that occurred on Metrolink back in 2005, that was a disaster for us because there was more patients than we had ambulances and resources. First thing we'll do is we'll go to a mutual aid system, which is we call in our neighboring fire departments to bring in their ambulances. But they're so limited in scope, or not in scope, but in number, that what we do is we will tap our private friends, the Schaefer Ambulance, American Medical Response, you name it, McCormick, whoever's available, we will through our dispatch center request private ambulances to help respond. So,
And that's all handled by Verdugo?
it's all handled by Verdugo, yes. Seamlessly handled by Verdugo.
We have 9 stations within the city, strategically located throughout. You can see the big area where there's no fire station coverage, and that's basically where the Verdugo Mountains are, where no one lives. Well, I shouldn't say no one lives, where there's not a large number of people living. How's that? 9 engine companies. At every one of the fire stations, we have 1 engine company. And on these engine companies, you have 1 captain, 1 engineer. The engineer is the person that drives the fire engine. 2 firefighter paramedics at all times. So in every district, we have 2 firefighter paramedics on duty, which is basically what we call advanced life support. They're the ones that can do the therapies that are beyond just CPR, administering oxygen, and maybe giving some glucose to a diabetic. We're talking about IV therapy. We're talking about pushing medications, pain management, and the like. 3 truck companies, we talked about these. Those are strategically located. We have 1 down at our headquarters, Fire Station 21, 1 at 26, which is on North Brand, and 1 at Fire Station 29, which is up in Montrose. And again, these are strategically located so that if we need them to ventilate a roof during a structure fire or to use the jaws of life to do an extrication, they're strategically located, but we only have 3 of them. And they are staffed with the same complement of captain, an engineer. The engineer is the one that drives it, and 2 firefighters. They could be firefighter single function, or they could be firefighter paramedics, but there's no requirement that we have to have a paramedic on the truck company, only on the engine company. And these will be known as basic life support. 6 ambulances strategically located as well. We have 2 emergency medical technicians. These are hourly employees, right? These are not sworn employees, hourly employees that work on our ambulances, and they drive our ambulances. They're civilian employees, and they're the ones who we load the patients in the back of the ambulance, and they get them to the hospital as safely and as quickly as possible.
And they're hourly because?
Well, they're hourly because it's a cost savings. Okay. To be truthful, it's a cost savings at the end of the day, and we were looking for a way to not cut the staffing on our fire engines and our fire trucks during the recession. And we came up with, it was a joint effort between the Glendale Firefighters Association and the management team to lower the amount of money that we spend on sworn people, keep our staffing the same on the engines and the trucks, and just instead of having firefighter paramedics on your engine company or on your ambulances, we put civilian EMTs on the ambulances. Yes.
Chief, that differs from LA City.
Yes, that differs from LA City.
You'll find a paramedic in the ambulance.
You will find either a paramedic or a sworn EMT firefighter.
Yeah. But what that necessitates in a response situation is that you're going to have to deploy both an ambulance and an engine.
Yes, that's correct.
With that paramedic on it.
That is correct, sir. Ironically, it's funny you should mention the LA City Fire Department. I had the chief of the LA City Fire Department meet me. We had a discussion about our ambulance system, and he's actually thinking they want to talk about how we implemented ours to see if they could do some type of a hybrid program to where when they need more ambulances and they need it to be staffed immediately, that they could do some type of an ambulance operator program. So it's starting to catch on. I know we've had departments all over the state of California come and view our program, including Bend, Oregon, and they implemented the same program that we run here based on what we do. 24-hour resources, we talked about that. Our minimum staffing is 1 battalion chief, that's the battalion commander, 12 fire captains, these are the people that run the 9 engines and the 3 trucks, 12 fire engineers, the drivers, the firefighter paramedics, the firefighters, and the ambulance operators. 2 of the ambulance operators work a 12-hour shift. It's a peak hour staffing car, what we call peak hour. It's staffed from 7:30 in the morning until 7:30 in the evening, basically because that's the time of the day that we get most of the calls, and we massage the schedule accordingly. Again, in a way to save money.
Would it not, they work 12-hour shifts, that means they get 4 hours of overtime every time that they work 12-hour shifts?
No, I would have to refer to Mr. Doyle on that. If it's under 40 hours, if they work a 12-hour shift and it's under 40 hours, is that?
That's correct. If we're talking about the hourly, the non-sworn ambulance operators, it's 40 hours in a week. Anything in excess of that is,
okay.
So a lot of them will hit that.
Okay.
The work schedule. So the work schedule for our operations section is a 3-platoon system. It's 3 24-hour shifts, and this is the predominant schedule in California. Basically, you start out at 7:30 in the morning and you work till 7:30 the next day. Firefighters work a 9-day rotating work cycle, and we'll show you what that looks like. 365 days, like I say, holidays, weekends, your birthday, their birthday, they're going to be there. They're going to be there for you with a smile on their face. Work week averages 56 hours a week. That's what we average. 53 of those hours are worked at straight time. And because not to get into a long, drawn-out diatribe about the FLSA, but 3 of those hours are time and a half based on federal law. And we talked about that. So the 3 platoons, we have 50 people on each platoon, and this is how they break out. In the month of July of this year, we had A shift working on the first day of the month. So you can see if you look at A shift, they worked the day, they were off for a day, they worked a day, they were off for a day. Wednesday is the last day of that 9-day cycle that they worked, and then they're off for 4 days. And that's basically how it works. That's the 9-day cycle.
So when they work 24 hours straight, they get a day off and then 24 hours straight?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And they stay, I mean, I know it depends on the calls, but sometimes they're awake during that entire...
Yes, sir. In the downtown area, south of the 134, basically, the incident load is pretty high. 24 hours a day. There's a lot of people in this town. And if you're having chest pain or you're having a stroke or whatever your problem is, or fire or traffic collision, a lot of our downtown companies run around the clock.
And how do you adjust? I mean, how do they adjust for that? I mean, do you have one day you're working 24 hours straight, then the next day you're off? I mean, I'm sure eventually
they do their best to rest at home. They go home for 24 hours. They get their rest. If for some reason they're required to work the next day and do 24 hours plus another 24 hours, we try to get them rest. We take the pulse. We train our captains to keep their fingers on the pulse of the health and wellness of the crew. If the health and wellness of the crew are suffering because of lack of sleep, we'll get them the rest that they need in between calls. But generally speaking, it works out pretty good. And that's basically that's the presentation on the fire department overview. I'd be more than happy to answer any more questions should you have any.
This was very helpful. Thank you. You guys have any questions?
I would like to get a copy of that presentation, though.
Yeah, it's very, very helpful. And just one quick question. So my understanding, at any given time, you have approximately 50 individuals that are covering that shift.
Yes, every day we have 50 people covering, 50 sworn people covering, not to mention the 6 ambulances during peak hours. Yes, but every day 50 sworn people will be on duty in the 9 fire stations.
Chief, thank you very much. This was very helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Very, very helpful.
Nice.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And one last thing, could we by any chance, never mind, sorry, I apologize.
I will send that PowerPoint to the members of the commission.
Yeah,
I'll email it tonight.
What's next?
Glendale Police Department recruiting and hiring report.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Carrion asked for a little bit of a breakdown of the, I think it was the information on the eligible established report from September, and really looking at information on our hiring process for police officer recruit. Just to give a little brief of overview, we have, as was alluded to earlier, we try to do the police officer recruitment on an ongoing basis because it's just what we have to do to stay competitive, to get all the best candidates, and to compete with the big, the big departments such as the Sheriff's Department and LAPD and some of the other surrounding jurisdictions. And so we try to do recruitments at least 4 times a year, and then within that we have a general police officer recruit process. And then we have the specialized recruitments that we do for bilingual we do on an ongoing basis. One is English Korean, and the other is English Armenian, and that means bilingual. They have to be fluent in both languages, and just as a means of ensuring that we have people that can speak those languages to provide service to the community. As the report indicates, we had a total in all the recruitments thus far from January 1st to November this year, 2,736 applicants. Of those, we had 144 that were in the specialized bilingual Korean/English, and then 251 that were in the specialized Armenian English speaking. The second page of this report does show a breakdown of those processes based on the number of applications received, those that were invited to attend the various phases of the exam, and what we ended up with at the very end. And as you can see, it's a rigorous process, but it's kind of a sign of the times. Part of the battle is getting people to show up to the examination process to begin with, and I think part of that is we've made it so easy and convenient to apply for jobs nowadays. It's all done online, and people can literally, with the click of a button, send their application off. There's not quite the commitment that there used to be when, I think some of the members of the commission recall when you used to apply for a job in the good old days. You'd have to type out an application, maybe you'd attach a resume, and there was quite a process involved in making that whole effort. And back in those days, we would see a much higher percentage of people stay in the process and not drop out at various stages. But anyway, the numbers that you see there are kind of a reflection of this process starts with a large number and it ends up with a very small number. On the third page, this is a description overall of those who had applied for the police officer recruit general process. This does not include the specialized bilingual bulletins, and it's broken down by our various ethnicities. And again, you see a small number in the Armenian category, for example, 2% of the applicant pool. But in most cases, if someone is of Armenian ethnicity, they're going to apply for the police officer recruit bilingual, English and Armenian. So that's typically where you see more of the Armenian candidates. We have some facts and figures here provided, and again, it's pretty generic, but it's here for Commission's consideration. If you have questions, one item of note in particular on the third page of this is the applications received for the police officer recruit general. You do see just pretty consistently a high number of Hispanic candidates for the position, which has significantly overtaken the white candidates, as well as the black and the Asian Pacific Islander, the other ethnic groups. So it's quite an interesting trend, and just I think reflective of the diversity of this community. Other than that, again, if the Commission has questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Sean Chavez is my analyst who handles most of the recruitment activity for the police department under the direction of Manya Hunanian. They're both here today, as is Deputy Chief Povolitis and Lieutenant John Gilkerson of our Professional Standards Bureau. So if there's any questions we can answer, I'd be happy to try and do so.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
And in my questions, I will defer to the expertise of my fellow committee member, Albert Abkarian, who indeed requested this information, especially that information that's depicted on page 14. And it's interesting that your office made a decision to provide us with some detail and data with respect to both the response rate and the failure or success rate of two different ethnicities. Of course, you didn't follow through on other ethnicities within the city. So the interesting question is there something here that suggests perhaps that the tests are inappropriate, the tests are either too difficult or too hard, or to be more specific, what is the average failure rate across the entire population of candidates rather than the breakout populations that your office, to use the word, arbitrarily chose?
Commissioner McCarley, we chose those because those are specific recruitments.
No, I understand. What is the average? What is the average rate? What are we looking at across the population? We have X number of applicants. Do we have the same failure rates? Because these are data points. Data can become knowledge from which we can derive perhaps amendments to our regulations or improvement in our process of recruiting so that we can bring more people to expand the diversity of our police department. So what are the numbers across the board?
Commissioner, we didn't provide that information.
It would be pretty easy to have in front of you.
I would think we could, but it would require another level of examination, mainly in the police officer recruit category.
No. All we need is you have a general population X number. You have 1,000 over the course of the 3-month recruiting period. So each one of those, you either have a response rate. They decide, yes, I'm going to show up for the PAT and the written exam, and then we either have pass-fail rates against the general population. Because if we see disparate, significant deltas or deviations between those populations and the general population, that suggests something. It could be, for instance, that the PAT is perhaps too rigorous. And that, as some folks out here have experienced over the course of time, that PAT served as a discriminator at a point in time when we required in police departments that all applicants be 5 feet 11 inches tall or else they cannot apply. So appears to me that information is available.
It should be, and we probably could have done a similar exercise that we did on page 14 for the data on page 15. And we could, if you'd like us to do that.
It just appears to me there's a certain reservation about providing that information,
there's no
which is relatively simple.
whatsoever. It's just we weren't given terribly specific information on what to provide, and we have that, and maybe Sean has further information for me.
Sean Chavez with the Human Resources Department. To answer your question specifically, I think, or at least I'll try to, without really information at hand, but our typical pass rate for the written exam is approximately 50%. So if you look at the police officer recruit bilingual English Armenian, it's a little less than that from the 44 that
it's
attend.
Like 25%.
Yeah, for the English Armenian, it is a little lower. English Korean, though, it is kind of in line with that 50%. So to answer your question, that's as a gross generalization, it's about 50%, and how that applies to those, you can see there on that flow chart.
Well, I'm not going to speak for my fellow committee members, but that does raise an interesting piece of data that can be subject to multiple interpretations.
Go ahead. I'll speak after you. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. I find this very interesting, and I guess it's what we asked for. But what I'd be more interested in seeing is the disbursement by ethnicity throughout the department in terms of hiring and promotions, and actually see, I guess you call it by rank, the police officers, the sergeants, lieutenants, and captains, and so on, to see the disbursement by ethnicity throughout the department, so we could see the hiring and promotional trends in terms of ethnicity in the department.
Commissioner Irvine, I'd be happy to run that report for you guys. That would be a separate report I could prepare for you
I'd
guys.
have to ask my fellow commissioners if that would be something they'd be interested in seeing.
Absolutely endorse.
I think if we can get everyone's input of the numbers and the data that they're looking for, and that's a great point. If we can have this come back at a later point as well, so we can get that data. And any other?
No, that's my point.
Commissioner.
First of all, I think that a more detailed report with all the information just requested to come back with this, and I would want to see the breakdown for all the other ethnicities. I'm really ecstatic to see Hispanics just in such a huge number. Almost 50% of the total applicants were Hispanic, which is just incredibly, I think it's great. But I think that everything needs to be, all the numbers should be able to, you should look at. First, I want to make a statement in reference to the fact that I believe that the department is doing or trying to do what they can to recruit as diverse as they can within the city. So I don't have too much problem. I'm pretty confident with that and your department. However, when you look at numbers of 1%, 2%, within a community with 48% or 45%, the numbers of the Hispanic applicants should be what Armenian applicants are, so to speak, with all due respect. And when you see a disparity of 44 taken, 3 passing, which is about 10%, excuse me, that concerns me, not as much as the police department is not hiring Armenians, but that the human resources might consider other options or alternatives that would be more in line with promoting police recruits in the Armenian community, in the Korean community, in communities where the numbers are really low compared to the actual numbers. Listen, Armenian applicants are the same as unknowns, which is kind of strange. So what I really think is that whatever approach we've had, and listen, I've gone through 4 police chiefs now, and I've sat down and have lunches with all of them, and going through 20 years now, and this number hasn't increased. There is a problem. And if whatever we've done is not working, whoever is in charge of this, whatever they're doing is not working. We got to start thinking outside of the box, because when you have 2% of the applicants, of which 3 pass out of 2,341 applicants, and in the Armenian community and 9 in the Korean, I think that there is a fundamental issue here. And I don't want to, again, I'm not saying that people are doing this intentionally, that somebody is intentionally not hiring Armenians. I'm saying that whatever approach we were taking for the past 20 years is just not working. So somehow we got to think of some other approach that would really bring this to light, and we have some solutions to this. I can't see 2,341 people filling applications, of which 3 Armenians being eligible. It just, for me, it's just mind-blowing. So with that, first of all, I do want to get a much more detailed report on both the applicants, the passing rate, everything, and broken down to the ethnicities. Second, I do concur with Commissioner Devine, where we do need to get different, seeing what the makeup is as officers and going to the management for us to be able to see what we have and what we need to do. So if we can get that report sometime in probably January, because December is going to be kind of slow. It's up to you. It's up to whatever the commission wants to do, and whenever Matt believes that a detailed report like that could be available.
Yeah, we'll put that together. Remember, we do want to bring back the commission rules. I mean, not to get off this subject, so that'll take up some. And my assumption would be we're bringing that back next month. But I'd say January or February is doable.
Yeah, that's fine. Could we ask that we actually share this report with the City Council as well, please?
Sure.
A copy of this should go to the City Council members, please.
Yeah, I think for me, the most important thing is the most qualified person to be hired.
Yes.
That's non-negotiable. I don't care where it comes from. Number 2, I agree with Commissioner Garian. We have to look at other options. However, we also should come up with some suggestions. We've sat here and we've requested things to improve, but I think it might be helpful for us also to help in coming up with suggestions of ways of making these numbers better.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. As you know, your staff and as Commissioner Perrin says, every chief that has been hired at the city has made this a very important goal. And I think they've all sincerely made that effort and tried different things. And, we can talk about the outreach efforts that we do really in this community to try to reach the target audience that resides in this community. It's something that I've made it a part of my my responsibilities, and again, the police chiefs, the fire chiefs, they've all had the same, and there have been increases. I believe we have close to 25 officers of Armenian descent, so there has been some progress made, but we can always do better. And I do appreciate, Mr. Chair, your suggestion that if this commission has ideas on how to improve that, we're absolutely interested in hearing those, because it's one thing to say, hey, we need to do a better job, but and I don't want to say we're tapped out of ideas, but we do need ideas. We do need suggestions on what can be done legally while maintaining the high standards we have and trying to fill these jobs. I will say this is, I've been in this business over 25 years. This is now the hardest, most challenging position to fill in government, period. Because, unlike 15, 20 years ago, where we just had a flood of applicants coming through the door all the time, this is not viewed as a desirable career as it once was. 20, 30 years ago, the profession was held in very, very high regard by probably 90 to 100% of the population. Nowadays, that's changed a little bit. There are a lot of critics, there are a lot of people second-guessing police departments, popular culture, and the media, and with the advent of cameras and everybody doing their job. It's a hard job, and getting candidates, much less to apply, but as you can see here, to show up has been a particular challenge. So we're doing our best, and I will say the frequency of our process, the 1 day physical agility written exam has made us more competitive, but we can always do more, and we certainly want to hear people's thoughts and ideas on how we can do better. Because,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
if I could, and I extend this to Mr. Doyle, my apology for the cross-examination of sorts.
Okay. That's why I make the big bucks.
But as you can fully appreciate, the four of us, the five of us, are attempting to do the hard work of the city. And this exploration that has been driven by each one of the commissioners here, we believe will ultimately benefit our city and the police department. And I personally will raise my hand in commendations toward our police department as constituted. That said, we are a wonderful city, we are a growing city, and as you have indicated, we have challenges associated with manning our police department, and in many ways having that police department reflect the diversity of our community. So this is a critical issue. So please accept the importance of this issue. It's not only here in Glendale, but as you rightfully reference, it is across the country. So thank you.
So I have one quick comment. Even though I understand that in nationwide we have some negative comments having made towards the law enforcement and police, I still believe that Glendalians still regard our police in a very high pedestal. We still have a lot of respect for them. We still care for them, and we still believe that it's an incredible job. And so, even though nationwide the position might not be as how how would you put it?
Desirable.
Desirable.
That's what I said.
But I think that Glendale Police Department is probably one of the most desirable police departments to be in.
I agree with you.
And especially and Glendalians have the same feeling. So this is the reason. If I felt that people just don't want the job, I wouldn't push as hard. But I think that there needs to be some other alternatives. And I understand your frustration because I've seen maybe going with different organizations, including others into the mix. There's a lot of things we can do. But again, once we have the full report, I think we can really, because I think just to be fair, Mr. Gazarian should be here when we get the full report because I think he would have a very good angle on this, and that's something that Mr. Gazarian really has a lot of knowledge on. So because of that, I say let's bring this back, full report, and then kind of really look into this sometime in February, January, February.
I appreciate that. And we may, not sure when the next process concludes, but we may have additional data. This is based on January through November, and we may have another process in between now and then. So that, it's always better to have more data.
Great.
All right. What's next?
Reports?
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, all I see on our reports would be the past due performance evaluations. That's on the very back of your packets there. And looks like we have 3 departments that have late performance evaluations. The rest are all with no past due evaluations. So it's a relatively good report for this month. Note, this is a note and file. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Okay. Any questions? I see none. What's next?
Civil Service Commission, staff comments.
We do before, Mr. Chair, if I could, and I recognize we had appropriate communications in compliance with the Brown Act about the subject of the proposed civil service rules and regulations, and I believe you led the charge by asking at our request that the matter be continued to a later date.
Correct.
Can we set that date now? And then I'd like to discuss for about 30 seconds a thought process with my fellow commissioners about how that presentation should be made.
Sure.
So a date, if I could, sir.
Would you be able to tell us when you're coming back with the Civil Service Rules review date? Is it the next meeting?
They are ready.
Okay,
I mean,
it was just being put December 13th?
The December 13th is the next meeting, but the report, as is constituted, is ready. So I can bring that in December or whatever the commission desires to do.
December?
Yeah, I'm okay with December 13.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure it was going to come this, so I didn't really review it. And this week has been just a crazy week. So if we had 2 meetings, I would have said next meeting, but next month would be just fine.
Yeah.
And again, what I did was compile a list of items that I thought should start the discussion.
I don't think you've done anything that was not what we asked you to do. So I appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you used the word start the discussions. I believe my expectation, again, I can't speak for my fellow commissioners, is that at some point in the future, we will have a motion to approve or disapprove those proffered regulations.
That's correct. And then, Commissioner McCarley, the reason I'm very cautious about this is the obligation to meet and confer.
Well,
with
you're
our
already
employees.
there. You took the words out of my mouth, because one of the areas of inquiry for me personally is that we have either a buy-in or we have appropriate criticism or comments from the employee associations and the management associations about whether these work. These are somewhat intricate. There are some significant changes, and I personally would like to have either that input encapsulated in either little summaries from the Glendale Police Officers Association or XY employee associations and from management.
Commissioner McCarley, this item, as you know, was on the agenda until you folks asked to remove it. I know several of the employee bargaining groups were planning to be here this evening to, if anything, observe or comment, which would have been their right to do. But the obligation to meet and confer has to come before decisions are made,
right.
Which is why I'm very careful about just introducing these concepts, because I don't want them to think that we're sort of putting this through and voting on it, and they're not going to have a say in it. They have to have a say under the law, under Government Code 3500.
And there might be additional items during that meeting that might come up with everyone's.
And I would expect the commission to
and this is
offer
what
some suggestions as well.
The way I see this process is this: that in December, we would actually have the changes you recommended plus changes from the from commission. I'm assuming, can we send those ahead of time or not? The recommendations for changes that each commissioner would like to have, could we send those ahead of time to be included in the packet or not?
What you can do is individually.
I don't want to be in violation of Brown Act.
No, I understand that. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, what you can do is you can send unilateral communications to the Director of Human Resources. He will not then share that with the rest of the commission, but he will assemble that into a report, and then all of those changes will be discussed at an open meeting.
Right. If not, then we have to come here on the 13th. Then we have to bring our recommendations in. Then they have to go back. But if you actually have the packet ready, then the employee associations could make comments on them. Then you still have a meet and confer with them after we partially say, yes, I think this package works. Then you'll meet and confer with them. You bring it back. We'll clean it up, and then we'll have a clean version for us to vote on at some point in the future.
The only addition I would make is that a single commissioner's comments would not become an effective proposed rule amendment.
Of course.
So it would be a proposed point of discussion.
You can just put proposed,
right.
Proposed changes by Albert Abkarian, proposed changes by Sam Manoukian. You can just put proposed this way.
And
then
we can talk about it during the meeting. And if there's further.
Absolutely.
You'll share this report you put together with all the unions before we meet on the 13th.
Yeah, well, and I had on this, and they, in addition to communication with them, I also, they get a copy of the agenda ahead of time.
So why don't we do this, Matt?
And if that is how the commission would prefer to do it, where individual commissioners send things in advance, frankly I don't want to give you folks homework to do, and some of you may want to do that, some of you may not. But my impression was that the commission in an open setting would discuss their ideas, and if you have individual ones, and then we do it that way and bring it back. But if it's more efficient to send me items in advance, I'm perfectly happy to accept that. I would just need it in advance of the next meeting in order to...
Yeah, the reason I say that is because at some point, just to be fair to the associations, police, fire, employee association, they should have a packet that has recommendations, because they might actually have I might bring something up and they're sitting there and they might say, wait a minute, I didn't have a chance to think about this changes.
But as long as we're not voting on it that evening,
that's true.
Then we're okay. We're not violating any of their rights.
I would say that the only thing that the commission could agree on is whether or not they agree on if you have one commissioner proposing a rule amendment but the others don't, then you wouldn't be taking that forward by way of a...
I know. I think it's just we're beyond that. Once we have the final packet that's voted on with the changes and redact the ones that majority didn't agree on, then that has to be given to... There has to be a meeting confer with all employee associations. So you're saying, why don't you bring your changes on that night? We'll work on them, and once we have a final package, then I'll do a meeting confer with them instead of submitting them.
Or submit it way in advance so he has a chance.
We could suspense them and set a date for submittal.
That's what I think. Anyone who wants to submit them, we should have a date that would say if you submit it after this, it won't be included in the packet. That doesn't mean you can't bring it up. It just won't be included in the packet.
This is true. Either way, I think the next meeting, there would need to be some discussion, whether it's extemporaneous thoughts by the commission or in addition to the things that I had put forth. But I'm open to however the commission would like to do this. I view this, it's not something we do all the time, so I view this as a process that will take a couple of meetings to finally get through. So,
I agree. I think so.
And depending on how long the meet and confer is, the meet and confer has to be done with each group, and I do appreciate that the commission understands that. I mean, after all, these rules affect them.
Exactly. I was going to say it's
100%.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I would incorporate all the commentary, and I think Commissioner Abkarian will provide us or a suggested suspense date in which we, if it's our intent or interest, to submit proposed rule changes and amendments, which can be incorporated in the 2-page. So far, Mr. Doyle and his great staff have provided us with 2 pages of proposed rules. I suspect that even though we are very hard workers across this table,
I'm not.
we won't generate more than 3 or 4 additional.
I'm sorry, I just need to interrupt and say that this is commissioner comments, and we've really led it to a very lengthy discussion.
No. These are appropriate comments at this particular point in time. What I'm suggesting is that we get from suggestion from Mr. Abkarian as to a date when we submit.
Will you email?
I think we need to ask Mr. Doyle that question. He's got to tell us
that's right.
what is the latest date you will accept comments from the commissioners in order for you to prepare a report and get it to the.
How about December 1st, Mr. Doyle?
That will give 2 weeks before the.
12.
That's a Friday, so you're really missing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you really have December 4th on. So if you want to do it on the November 27th.
It would be helpful prior to December 1st.
Okay,
So November
27th. Let's do November 27th.
Does that work?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that's the Monday after Thanksgiving, so.
November 27, 2017.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Certainly applaud and support that particular date and the methodology that you and Commissioner Abkarian have put forth, which appears to accommodate the requirements of our fine HR department. That said, I want to solicit perhaps an agreement that we extend an invitation to our employee associations, just as
That's exactly, I think, what
across the
Matt's
board,
wants
so
to
that
do.
they have an opportunity to participate in this conversation. We will, recognizing the restraints upon our ability to endorse and pass these recommendations until the requisite period of consultation and conference under the CBA's collective bargaining agreements is accomplished. But we invite them.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly what Mr. Doyle is going to do.
Will that be accomplished?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. What's next?
I would like to just.
sorry.
No. Next, go ahead. I just wanted to, before we adjourn, I wanted to adjourn today. We had a commissioner that lost a limb as a result of stepping on a mine, Roy Coleman, who served this commission with an incredible accuracy. He brought so much to this commission, and I would like to adjourn tonight with Mr. Coleman in mind with Veterans Day coming up.
Absolutely.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Absolutely.